They banished her. At first she didn't resist. She stood in silence as the townspeople shouted, their torches flickering in the night air. Their accusations were louder than their reasons. Witch, outcast, curse-bringer. Her house, her life, was ashes behind her. The smoke stained the stars. Her name was Mara Hale. Once they trusted her. Once she had been their healer, their advisor, the one who knew the patterns of storms and soil better than any elder. But knowledge could become fear, and fear could become hatred. So they burned her. And when they were finished, they drove her into the wastes beyond the valley, where nothing but sand and ruin stretched to the horizon. They said she would die out there. They hoped. Mara didn't die. She disappeared. For years. The town of Grey Hollow told stories to their children, of the witch in the wastes, of the shadows beyond the hills. They warned them never to speak her name. They thought they were safe. But their safety was borrowed, and their debt was coming due. When the sky cracked, when the storms came, when the earth trembled and the rivers turned black, when the collapse began, the people of Grey Hollow remembered the woman they had exiled. And for the first time in 20 years, they whispered her name not in hatred, but in hope. The first signs were subtle. Cattle wandered into the hills and never returned. Rivers slowed, then stopped. The air grew heavy, charged like a storm without rain. Children became sick with no cause. Crops rotted in the soil before harvest. Elders held ceremonies. They blamed bad seasons. Then they blamed the outsiders. Then they blamed each other. But none dared say the truth. None dared say her name. Until the night the sky opened. It was not rain that fell. Ash, black as sorrow. It choked the fields. It drowned the wells. And when it touched skin, it burned. The people screamed. And in their terror, they remembered the woman they had driven into the wastes. The woman who warned them. The woman whose house they burned. Mara Hale. Desperate and broken, the people of Grey Hollow did what they swore they never would. They sent their strongest riders into the desert to beg. She was not where they expected. Not dead, not starving, not waiting. She was ready. They found her beyond the edge of the world, where the sands carved canyons deeper than memory, where no map dared mark. She had built something none of them could understand. Towers of stone and steel spiraling into the sky, covered in markings older than language. Gates of iron sealed the only entrance. It wasn't a fortress. It was a refuge. She had built it alone. The riders dismounted, their throats too dry for apologies. Fear outweighed pride. They knocked. They begged. For hours, nothing answered. Then the gates opened, and she stood there. Older, yes, but unbroken. Her skin sunburned, her hair streaked with gray, her eyes colder than night. She said nothing. She didn't need to. She turned, and they followed. Inside, the air was cool. The walls hummed with power, not from coal or oil, but from deep currents beneath the earth. Gardens bloomed where no sun reached. Water dripped from silver pipes. She had taken the ruin they sentenced her to, and built life. The riders wept. She did not. She only said 4 words. Tell them I'm coming. The gates of Grey Hollow opened for her, not with celebration, with silence. Children hid behind their mothers, elders stood frozen. The ash still fell from the sky, soft as snowfall, deadly as memory. Mara crossed the threshold alone. No one dared stop her. She walked past the burned circle where her home once stood. The charred foundation still scarred the earth. No one had rebuilt there. She smiled, not from joy, from inevitability. At the town square she spoke. You have 3 days. No one understood. Not then. She explained nothing. She walked the streets, pausing at wells, at fields, at rivers. She placed stones. She carved symbols. She drew lines in dust. 3 days. And on the 3rd the sky split again. But this time the ash stopped at her boundaries. Her wards held. But not forever. She gathered the elders, and she told them the price. Not in gold, not in worship, in obedience. From this night onward she would command, and they would follow, or they would burn. They didn't argue. They couldn't. The ash storms pounded the valley for 9 days. Beyond her wards, animals withered to bone. Rivers boiled. Buildings cracked under the weight of black dust. But inside her lines, life clung on. Barely. Mara moved like the old stories said witches moved. Not like a person, but like a force. She spoke little. When she did, it was command. When she touched the earth, things changed. Poisoned fields flushed green. Dead wells sputtered water. She didn't explain. And the people stopped asking. Instead, they obeyed. They fetched stone where she pointed. They carved runes they didn't understand. They built towers on hills and trenches around homes, not walls. Conduits. Her work wasn't protection, it was preparation. The ash wasn't the end, it was the signal. Something worse was coming. Mara knew. She had built her refuge not to hide, but to survive what followed. She called it the tearing. A name that meant nothing to them, but everything to her. It was not weather, not war, not a god's wrath. It was a cycle. The earth shifted, the sky burned, the rivers died, not by accident, but by design. Mara had seen it once before, long before she was banished, long before Grey Hollow existed. She had seen it written in ruins buried beneath the desert, a pattern older than their histories, civilizations that rose then vanished. She learned from their bones, and she built, not to stop it, but to endure it. Now, it had begun again, and her preparations were incomplete. Even with Grey Hollow's reluctant obedience, she didn't have enough. Not enough stone, not enough time, not enough lives. She needed them all. So she took control. She abolished the council. She dismantled the temple. She seized every resource. The town was hers now. They hated her, but they followed. Because outside her lines, only death waited. The transformation was brutal. Grey Hollow ceased to be a town. It became a machine. Streets vanished beneath stone pathways etched with lines of power. Homes collapsed to make way for channels and conduits. People no longer lived in houses, they slept in communal chambers carved beneath the earth. Children no longer played, they hauled stone. Elders no longer taught stories, they ground powders for wards. Mara drove them like a general commands an army. Every heartbeat was preparation. Every breath, survival. The people whispered in the dark, witch, monster, curse. But none fled, because none survived beyond her lines. Each morning they saw the dead. At the boundary markers, bodies lay blackened and twisted, caught outside her protection. Strangers who came too late, friends who disobeyed, warnings written in flesh. And yet, every morning, Mara stood at the western ridge, watching the horizon, waiting. For what? They didn't know. But she did, because the ash was only a prelude. The tearing had not yet truly begun. It began not with sound, but with silence. The ash storm stopped, the winds died. For 3 days, the valley held its breath. And then, the sky cracked. A line of fire, horizon to horizon, as if the heavens themselves had split open. Light poured down, not sunlight, but something colder, pale as bone, heavy as sorrow. Mara's wards trembled, her conduits flared, and the people of Grey Hollow saw, for the first time, the shape of the thing approaching. Not a beast, not a god, a storm of fractures, reality itself tearing apart, like glass under pressure, the tearing. Mara moved without sleep, without pause. She reinforced her lines, she deepened the trenches, she carved new sigils with blood when stone cracked, and when her hands bled too much to work, she commanded others to continue. Her voice never shook, but her eyes dimmed. She knew what was coming, and she knew it would not stop. Not this time. The first fractures touched the valley floor at midnight. Where they struck, earth crumbled, not broken, but erased. Trees dissolved. Stone collapsed into dust finer than ash. Space itself tore open, silent and merciless. Her wards held, barely. The conduits glowed white-hot. Mara burned with them. She felt every fracture as if it cut her flesh. Every collapse drained her strength. But she stood. The people watched from their underground chambers, seeing light sear through the cracks above, hearing the hum of power coursing through stone, smelling the air itself burn. She didn't allow them to pray. Prayers wouldn't save them. Work would. The outer channels failed first. She rerouted power manually, her hands blistering, her lungs raw. Her defenses weren't walls. They were tides. She could only redirect the tearing, never stop it. Each fracture diverted around Grey Hollow weakened her lines. Each hour survived meant the next would be worse. Mara counted hours like wounds, and knew her end approached. Her body gave out before her mind. At dawn, they found her collapsed beside the main conduit, hands fused to stone, eyes open but seeing nothing. Sheriff Lorne, who once led the mob that burned her house, carried her to the central chamber. He whispered apologies she never heard. For the first time since her return, the people chose without command. They continued her work. They followed her diagrams. They burned their hands carving her runes. Children ran messages between trenches. Elders fed the power lines with their own blood when oils ran dry. Without understanding, they obeyed, because Mara had taught them, not with words, with survival. And when she woke 3 days later, barely alive, she saw them working. and for the first time since exile, she wept. Not from pain, from hope. But her mind knew the truth. Hope wouldn't save them. Her lines wouldn't hold much longer. The fractures were changing. She needed a solution she didn't have. In the silence between fractures, Mara found her answer. Not in spells, not in stone, in surrender. She had built Grey Hollow into a machine of survival. But machines failed. People endured. She gathered the remaining leaders, Sheriff Lorne, Elder Bryn, the young ones who had never called her witch, and she told them what she never dared say. "This will fail," they protested. Begged, she silenced them. "It's not your walls that survive the storm, it's your will." They didn't understand, not fully, but they listened, and that was enough. She ordered the final sequence, not to strengthen the lines, to break them. Her conduits became channels inward, not repelling the tearing, drawing it, consuming it, sacrificing Grey Hollow to save its people. The final night came without warning. The sky turned to glass. The fractures descended. Mara stood alone in the center of the valley, her skin cracked like the earth around her, her bones humming with power. She activated the convergence. Her wards shattered, her conduits reversed. Grey Hollow became a beacon. The tearing struck, not around the valley but into it, into her. She anchored it, held it. Her body burned, her soul fractured, but she did not let go. Her final command to Sheriff Lorne echoed through the stone. When the light stops, and then silence, the fractures collapsed inward, the sky healed, and Mara Hale was gone. Days passed, then weeks. No fractures returned, no ash fell. The valley held. When the survivors finally emerged, they found Grey Hollow transformed, not ruined, rewritten. Where conduits once channeled power, green life now grew. Where trenches once held blood, streams now flowed. The valley sang with silence. Mara's lines remained, not as wards but as roots. Her sacrifice hadn't destroyed the tearing, it had bound it, turned destruction into renewal. The people rebuilt, but not as before. No walls, no divisions, only a circle. At its center they placed no statue, no monument, only a single stone, etched with the only name that mattered, Mara. Years turned, children grew. The story of the witch who saved Grey Hollow was told not as legend but as truth. Not a monster, not a curse, a woman, a builder, a protector. Her teachings endured not in spells, but in memory. Prepare before the storm, endure without mercy, protect without hesitation. And every dawn, as sunlight touched the stone marked with her name, the people whispered the words she left behind. Not all walls are prisons, and they lived because of her.